Hey everybody, welcome. We are live for another Inkarnate live stream. Today we're doing part 9 of our Creating an Epic World series. We're going to be focusing on mostly the polar regions or polar biomes, as well as some cloud ones, so kind of a fantasy biome called Cloud that's going to kind of bridge these two major land masses that you can see there. So we're going to be focusing on fjords, polar barrens, tundras, and of course that fictional cloud biome, which I'm excited for. So super glad that you're all here. Hey, Typher Zero, glad that you are here. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. So first we'll start with those polar regions because I find that the polar regions are actually kind of easy to make. They're not too complex. We can kind of start with kind of the basic one, which is like this tundra. And if you're not sure what a tundra is specifically an area which is in the polar region. It is technically has permafrost, which means there's like this permanent underlayer of ice or frost. And so because of that, the more deeper rooted plants like trees can't really gain the proper root or the rooting inside of that biome, and so there's no trees or very little, if any, at all. So tundra is more defined by very like grasses, lichen, that kind of stuff. And there isn't really any tall trees or anything like that in the tundra, but it doesn't mean that it's completely it's without vegetation. So we'll be able to cover that as well. So let's quickly, hey, good day to you, Desiree. Glad that you're here. So we'll start with that tundra first, and there's a couple of them. There's one over here as well. We'll kind of get started with it. I'm going to zoom in here, but I want to show basically that there is like this kind of permafrost, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's always snow on the ground. There is this very short part in the season of where a tundra is, where there is warm enough for like plants to grow and stuff, but it's a very short growing season and it doesn't last very long. So when I'm making a tundra on the map, you have two options. You can give it the more warmer time of the year, and so you can show some more grasses and stuff like that, or you can have it more during its more dominant seasons, which is like the cold or winter part of the seasons. So the way that I would go about the more dominant part is just to add this snow texture. If you go into the catalog and just type in snow within the fantasy world style, I don't think it's actually in here. It might be in parchment. Let me verify real quick. Let me check here. Let's go into parchment world. We'll type in snow. I think there it is here. There it is, cracked ice. If you ever get confused about which one the alphas are, cool little trick is to go to show names, and then that way you'll be able to see what it is. But in parchment world, you have these snow textures. I'm not going to use this heavier one. I'm going to use this lighter one. And then what I'll end up doing is I generally try to resize, bring the scale down a little bit, and then I'll bring the opacity down. When it comes to good blending, you want to apply several coats on top of each other. And so just right on top with the FG layer, which your land should be made out of, and there will be changes to the editor in the future to where there isn't going to be FGBG, this kind of stuff. There'll be some changes, and we can, in this video, do some sneak peeks, previews of that new editor. But because there's so much to cover, we're going to do these first. So let's do that tundra. So during the dominant season, you're going to see more like this, kind of this snow that you would have on the ground. And then you don't have to worry about putting a whole lot down on top of that because there isn't much, right? It's the more snowier season. If it's quite a bit, like if it's the coldest part of the season, you can fill it in with a lot of snow like this. That'll give it that more sunny part or snowy part. If you wanted to show, let me remove this snow real quick. If you wanted to show that it was part of the more warmer season, then you can instead use this alpha grass texture, which works really good. So this grass texture right here. And there's a lot of things that you can do with this texture, but I'll apply a little bit so you can see it. But what it does is it adds this little grass here and there. Now this works great for plateaus, plains, and stuff like that. But overall, this grass works great for little patches of grass here and there. And I still have some of the white from the snow that's on a little bit on top, a little bit, right? Because there's usually a little bit of a mix. So then I can just go down and just apply a little bit of snow alpha with that grass texture. And then you also kind of get this more warmer season where you do have a lot of the grasses and the lichen and that stuff kind of growing, the small shrubs. that kind of stuff kind of pops up. So there are two ways to do that tundra. Remember, it's where there's some vegetation showing because it's the warmer season, or if it's the colder season, then just add a heck of a lot more of that alpha snow texture to really give it that colder kind of permafrost look that you would see during that season. So that kind of best defines that. So this one right here, we did it with a little bit of grass in the warmer season. You can see it's already kind of like this a little bit here. So I'll make this one with a little bit more snow on it, just to create this transition between the more snowy parts you see up here. So I'll just kind of push it into here and just add a little bit along the coastline. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. And I'll add some here as well. And then we'll move on to this tundra down here. So there's one more tundra to do. We're going to follow that same technique. I'm going to add some snow in here. And this is a great way to create transition too, right? Because this is the polar region right below, and then above that is not a polar region. And so you want to create a transition between your polar region where there's a lot of snow and then the other biomes. How do you blend between biomes? That snow alpha texture is a great way to do that. So I can go in like this and just put a little bit here and there, and it kind of blends in quite well. Now, some cool tricks that you can kind of do with the grass texture, you can change the hue to get some different colors out of it. Sometimes there's like this brown lichen, there's this orange lichen. You can get different colors and stuff like that. But to get this dirty orange, you can go to -19. Like this. Let's go down one, -19, and I'll apply here. I'm going to zoom in, and you can kind of get this kind of more dirtier orange. Let me get back to 100% so you can kind of see it better. But you kind of get this more orangish kind of color. I can also boost the brightness up a little bit to give it that more brighter color. You can kind of get these different, more browner colors, and I think this also works really well. So now you kind of have a mix between the snow, the different types of grasses, and then it kind of creates this nice variety of color. And I can do the same thing up here too. I've used nothing but that, so why don't I apply a little bit of the brown here as well up to the side, and let's put some over here as well. Just a little bit more. That will give it some contrast as well, right? You have these light snow-like alpha textures against the darker grass texture, especially the warmer color, and you creates this nice contrast, giving it a more realistic kind of blend. So making a tundra is not complex, and one of the reasons why it's not complex is because it doesn't really have any tree formations of any kind, and so you don't have to worry about where to place all these tree clusters. You mostly can rely on textures to put together your tundra, at least the biome part. You can put structures and stuff, and they can be all kinds of different things, but that's basically breaks down tundra. It's pretty simple stuff. It's in your polar regions. It's got permafrost, pretty much treeless, and it's going to have a variety of vegetation, very small shrubs, lichen, moss, that kind of stuff. And that stuff will show up more during the warmer season. During the colder season, apply more of that white alpha snow texture. So pretty easy. Let's do a fjord. I'm excited about this one because fjords are really freaking cool. Fjords are like where it's an inlet that's been formed by glaciers that carve its way through mountains. And then it kind of goes out into a mouth, out into the sea. So it's basically millions upon millions of years of glaciers pushing outward and kind of carving out this ravine out of it. And so fjords are super cool. Now, let's talk about scaling when it comes to doing a fjord. The thing about a fjord is that you probably wouldn't see one at a scale that we're working right now. They're just too small. You probably wouldn't be able to see them at this scale. So you will have to exaggerate the scale of the stamps just a hair, just to illustrate that there's a fjord there, right? A fjord isn't so big or so massive that you're going to see it from this large scale. So you have to realize, don't get frustrated if you have to scale up your stamps a little bit. It's just the way that it is when you're trying to represent something on a map. You have to scale them up a little bit. We'll talk more about this scale between geography and points of interest in the next episode when we start putting down our points of interest and stuff. So let's kind of zoom in here. So there are these really nice stamps that exist in the fantasy world. I believe it's in terrain, but I'll scroll down and see if I can find it. It's right here under terrain. There it is. And there are these nice icebergs and these ice floats. And these are going to work great. Now, one thing I don't really care for these right now, just because of where we are, is I don't care for that really bright blue color. So you can always change the hue. Let's say you want them to be a green iceberg or a purple one or an orange one, whatever it might be. That's up to you. I'm going to desaturate it, which means I'm going to take the saturation in the color slider and bring it all the way down. And I'm also going to bring that brightness up a bit. And now I kind of have these nice icebergs, and I'm going to make these act as the mountain ranges in which the fjord is going to come around. So I've prepped that stamp, and I'm ready for that. Now I'm going to create the inlet part where the water is kind of going into the land. So I'll want to pick the texture, this water blue texture, which I used here. I'm going to set it to the foreground later because I want to paint it. So I'm going to paint it. I'm going to bring the brush size down. Let's go with about 3. And I'm going to put a couple of them. We're going to start one here. There's a nice mouth here. So this works great. Now, just a reminder about doing your rivers. You do have that quandary about scale, right? If it's at such a giant or such a large scale, then your rivers are going to be tiny and they're probably not going to do a lot of large snake-like meanders. They're going to be small like that, right? So just kind of remember that. I'm creating these larger meanders for this river or this inlet for the fjord because I want to be able to create enough room to put my icebergs around it and to overlap it to give it this fjord type of look, right? So I'm going to have to cheat a little bit with scale. So I'll zoom in. And I'm going to strategically place these. I want them to be about the same size of my mountains. And I'm going to place them to where they overlap some of that. See how it overlaps that river right there? Where that inlet is? That's great. So I'll do the same thing. I'll keep finding ones where they overlap. Like this one right here overlaps. That looks good. Let's put that one right there. Let's put it right here. This one kind of overlaps enough. I kind of like it like that. We'll let that one overlap. Let's put another one right here. Let's put one over here. And then let's create maybe an arch that kind of goes over where the water is. And then I'll have this one kind of connect to it right here. And then to sweeten it, the last bit of the deal, I'll go ahead and take these same mountains that I'm using here. And I'm going to desaturate them. And I'm going to use this transition where they kind of connect in here. I'm only using the icebergs so that because they overlap the inlet part. And so this way I can kind of create this transition between mountains that kind of lead to the fjord here. Right here, let's create a little bit more transition. Let's create a little out here. Let's create one here. Kind of branches kind of going off this way. There we go. And so now you have a nice icebergs. I think I will kind of bring the contrast down just a little bit. There we go. Just kind of match those other ones. There we go. So there's your first fjord. Now, one thing you can also do is what's really cool is you can take some of these ice floats right here and you can place them out in the ocean right where the mouth is of the fjord. And we'll give it this kind of nice effect. We'll put some here, maybe one over here. The trick to this is to use scale. So you'll have a big one, then you'll have a small one, then you'll have a medium-sized one. And that's really how you should be going about doing it, is different size of these icebergs to kind of get, or these little ice floats. There you go. And then what I'll do is I'll create a little bit more transition between where that inlet is. So I'll create some cracked ice and I'll kind of place the cracked ice underneath, because what you have right now is this kind of blue texture from the ocean underneath it. And there isn't much that is kind of creating a transition between these ice floats and the textures beneath it. So first I'll kind of like bring the brightness up a little bit, and maybe I'll bring the contrast down a little bit just to kind of match the other stuff. And then I'll go into my texture catalog. In Parchment World, there'll be this cracked ice texture, cracked ice. You're always going to have to change the scale a little bit. And then make sure it's set to that BG layer. I'm going to bring the scale up a little bit. I'm right underneath. I'm going to place a little bit of cracked ice underneath it, and like this. And now you have some nice transition there, and you can make it a little bit more prominent just underneath each one. So now you have your fjord, and then you have the ice floats in front of the fjord where all of this ice and stuff kind of flowed out right here. So making a fjord is pretty easy. Let's make one more right over here. It's a nice spot for it. We'll go ahead and do it again. We'll create a river. Let's go ahead, make that inlet. Again, I'm just going to make the curves fairly large. I know that's probably a little out of scale, but that's okay. Remember, we want to emphasize the fjord part, so we'll go ahead and place these. This time I'll flip them around so that this way I'm not using the exact same ones and they look like I'm just being repetitive. So I'll end up just taking these, put one here. Let's put one there so it's overlapping. Let's put one over here. And then let's put one right here so it kind of, let's put it right there. That looks good on the overlap. Do I need to put any more down? I think one more right here might look good. Okay, and then I'll go in and kind of select this mountain right here. And then continue my overlapping and then kind of placing the mountains where I want them. Fjords are a fun biome. Okay, let's go ahead and scale down a little bit. And then I'm going to add a little bit of my snow transition, just to transition beneath these mountains here, a little bit of snow. And then I'll even put some in the water too, just a little bit like this, just to kind of create a little bit more transition. And then underneath those mountains, a little bit of snow. There we go. All seems to be coming together. All right, I have done so many changes with those just those two biomes alone. So let's quickly save it. And then we'll go ahead and move on to a polar barren. And then we'll continue on the other polar biomes. And then we'll move on to cloud. We've only gone about 17 minutes in, so we've gotten a lot done. That's great. So a polar barren is located like within a tundra or around a tundra. But basically what it is it's a region that's so cold that actually not even vegetation can kind of grow there, except for when there's maybe just a little bit of vegetation. So what's cool about this polar barren, that's funny, by the way, about the polar barren is that you don't have to do much to it. You can just add some snow texture, and you can add like some cracked ice. Sometimes I'll add a cracked ice to it like this, just to kind of show that there's not much there. It's like a barren. And so I think cracked has this kind of barren like feel to it. Not much is growing there. And then you can take a grass texture and just in small areas, put just a little bit of grass in some very tiny little areas. So just it's usually little pockets where a little bit of grass or something might be growing. And so I'll just kind of pick these little pockets like this, because there can be some vegetation around it. It's just that it's not much, right? And so to show that scarcity, you can use contrast, right? You see how when I just put that cracked ice down, it just looks like some kind of polar biome, right? But when I add in just a little bit of vegetation, it creates this vast contrast between this tiny little bit of grass or vegetation and then this vast cracked like barren space. So a way of kind of creating that barren feel is just to put a very small amount of vegetation in there, just scattered here about in little pockets. And then that contrast will really kind of show like, hey, this is a very barren place. There's only so much vegetation here. So the polar barrens are pretty easy to make. So not complex. Let's go ahead down to these regions. Let's go ahead and create these polar barrens. And we're just going to use the same concept, right? That cracked ice. I'm going to place that cracked ice here, some cracked ice here, here, and here. That's great. So got that cracked ice feel. Then I'll grab that grass, scale down, and then just kind of pick the little spots. And I would recommend using like a darker color for the grass, by the way, so that way it contrasts against that white cracked ice. I don't recommend using like a white grass or something like that. You won't be able to distinguish between the cracked ground and the grass. So you have to use kind of a darker kind of color whether it be green or brown or whatever color you want. I'm using brown because I kind of feel like the grass is, or this grass is kind of dead. Kind of makes sense. There we go. So polar barrens, super easy to make. So you've got Tundra, polar barren, barren, and then we also made Fjords. So let's go ahead and make cloud, and then we might add in some special biomes. I didn't know it was going to go this quickly to kind of make all this stuff. So it's kind of cool that it's going quickly. So I'll probably add in a couple more biome stuff. And then the next episode, we're going to be focusing a lot on lore and points of interest. So I'm excited about that part. So about my cloud regions, what I kind of wanted, the idea was to create a bridge between these two major land masses right here. So right here, I want to create this kind of like bridge made of like clouds that goes and bridges these two land masses. And then in here, I'll probably is where I'm going to have my world tree. Probably. I mean, I already have like a world tree kind of right here. So, I mean, there could be a creature inside of here that's kind of protecting this kind of region right here, the world tree. So I'll probably end up putting some kind of sea creature in here. And then that way, the only real way that you can kind of get to this continent from the other one is to kind of sail all the way around to here. You can't really take this sea right here to go across to get to the other side. It's protected by that sea creature. So we're going to, first I'll probably put down the sea creature in there just to kind of show like, hey, this water is dangerous. I think this one right here is going to work just fine. Now, when it comes to the scaling issue, it's that same thing we were talking about earlier. Obviously, if it was at scale, you probably wouldn't even be able to see the creature, no matter how big it was, right? It's because it's at this world scale. So to kind of show that there is this massive creature there, I'm going to just kind of have it be a representation of the creature. And then that way, it's not like, well, wait a minute, this creature is as large as an island, right? So to kind of avoid that problem, I'm just going to say that it's a representation of the creature instead of its actual scale. This is something that you will have to grapple with when you're working on a map, right? Because pure scale won't work outside of maybe a satellite image, but you can get close. You can get much, much close to it as you can. So just kind of keep that in mind, because the scale thing is always going to be something that's going to be difficult for every kind of cartographer to decide on how they want to go about it. So sea creature, I'm going to put that there for now. I might do some more texturing and stuff with it, put some waves and stuff. But for now, I'm just going to leave it there. And next, I'm going to grab my clouds. Now, there are a couple clouds within the fantasy world style. You've got this more kind of softer one that doesn't have any kind of line work. It's not cartoony. It's a little bit more what you would consider a little more realistic. So you kind of have to make an artistic choice about how is it that you want to make your bridge. What we could do is we can do both. Let's use on one bridge, I'll use a cloud, the more softer clouds, and on another one, I'll use the line art ones. And then you guys can decide, and who's watching, which one is better, and then we'll redo that other one with that. So we'll start with the cartoon one first, I think. And you can choose whichever one. There's this more grayed out kind of one, and there's this one that's got a little bit more orange, kind of tannish color to it. And there is a limitation to these, so because there's only so many of them. And so what you end up kind of do is you have to kind of fight with them just a little bit to kind of place enough to where it doesn't look like there's a repetition of stamps. So I'm kind of placing them in a way where it doesn't look like I'm using a lot of the same stamps. Now, if you want to select all of them without selecting anything else, just select one and then select all from this set, and you'll be able to move them around. So now I can kind of move this and kind of place it to create my kind of sky bridge. So now that I have that bridge there, then I can I'm going to put a POI on top of it because I do want to have this cloud bridge be protected. So I want to put maybe some stuff on it. I'm hesitant to use a lot of white with this because we've been doing these polar regions, and so I don't want to desaturate everything. It kind of looks, I don't want it to look weird desaturating everything, so I'm not going to end up desaturating the clouds. But we do need to decide like a point of interest that we want to put on top of it, and this is an issue that you have to kind of make when you are kind of putting down your points of interest is that if you're going to use an isometric point of interest, and by isometric, I mean more like this. This is kind of more of an isometric point of interest, or pseudo-isometric. And then you also have its counterpart, which is kind of a flat POI. And you have to make the decision which one you want to use. Now, you can mix and match them, and I find that that does work, but it does take a little bit more work to kind of figure out, like, how is it to make those two different contrasting art styles kind of come together. So what I normally do is I would just pick one. I would either pick the isometric or pick the more flat-faced one. So you have to make that decision for yourself, but for continuity's sake, you should probably pick one and kind of stick with one. I think the way that this map kind of looks, I'm kind of okay with using the more isometric, and I think it would make the map a little bit less flat by adding in the isometric stuff, because when I look at this isometric stamp and then I look at this one, I kind of feel that this one kind of matches better to this kind of map, and that's the decision that you'll have to figure out. What I would do is I would put down both and just kind of see which ones look better when working on your map, because some might work better than others. You got to make that choice. So we're going to stick with isometric, and I want to put like either like a tower or some kind of defenses, right? I don't want people just to be able to climb that and then just be able to not have it defended. So I'm going to pick a tower, and these are going to act as like the tower defenses. And there are some nice ones that kind of already fit with this color already. Kind of, you can see that this kind of matches well with that color, and I think that it'll work well. And I'm going to place, I want to talk about depth here. So you can place them in different ways. You can place one on the front, so where it's actually on top of a cloud, but then you can also create some depth by taking it down a layer and then putting it behind a cloud. This will give it this kind of sense of depth by doing that. And then you can also change the varying layers of each cloud so that you have clouds overlapping structures and then structures overlapping clouds. And then it creates this sense of depth to it. For now, I'm just going to place them all on top, but I'm going to place a couple here. So these are kind of like checkpoints that your players will kind of have to go to. So there are these towers that kind of go on top like that. And then we want to add a little bit more to it. Like maybe we want to add, like maybe there's a gate that kind of leads somewhere, or there's a larger tower in the center of it. We can do that too. Like maybe there's just a larger tower at the top of the gate. And then just some of these smaller ones here. And then I'm actually going to take a cloud and put some up in the front. Remember that layering thing I talked about? And I'll just place a couple right in the front of it like this, just to give it a little bit more overlap. I'm just going to hide that door. And now I've kind of created that overlap. The other trick that you can do is to create contrast. So I can push this down a couple layers and then bring the brightness down. And then I can place just a couple underneath of it and behind it. And this is going to create this sense of depth, like there's clouds that are higher up and clouds that are lower. So I can put these ones, put some underneath right here like that, put some right here. And then I can do the same. I can bring one up and make it brighter, and then bring it up a layer, and then kind of place those like that. And now you're getting this sense of contrast when you're putting your clouds together. So it kind of gives it this sense of depth when you're putting it together. Well, there's kind of our cloud kind of biome right there. I do think I want to add some stuff to it. Like the tower is defending like a crystal. So I think that would be important. So we can go into heraldry. I'm really looking forward to the next stream. We can really expand on this lore. There's a nice crystal right here. I'm going to place that just right above the tower. Or I can place a bunch of little ones on top like this. I'm going to start to create this kind of theme. Have these crystals kind of floating over each tower, and then something should be floating over that big tower. And I'm not sure yet. It could be some kind of village. It could be like this sun-like symbol right here to kind of represent like a solar temple. It could be this swirl right here. And what's cool about this is that we wanted to give it a more isometric look. Set it to 0 rotation, and then have the heart bars, and then boom, there you go. Now you have your more isometric kind of swirl like this. And what I'll do is I'll create a series of them, which might look cool. Like here's one, here's the second one, and I'll flip it so that way it's not all the same. And then we'll copy paste one more and then put it up on top. And what I will do is I'll put these crystals above, and then I can kind of make this a little bit bigger. Like this. Let's move this up a little bit more this way. There we go. And I can really get that on there. Put this one on top. And then put that one up there. Now you have these nice swirls kind of going around these tower right here. And I think that looks nice. Okay. I think that looks good. So, and then you, of course, when it comes to adding little details, some of the best stuff you could do is just add light sources. In the fantasy battle map style, there are several light stamps that you can use. So if I just type in light like this, and then I can change the hue of the light, you'll notice that there's already kind of a white kind of glow around the crystal. And so I feel like I don't want that to clash with by using an object shadow. So I'm going to do something different. Instead, I'm just going to use a light source instead. I'm going to put it right on top, and then I'll just change the hue until I get the color that I want. And then I'm just going to copy and paste it. And now those crystals will really, really pop against those clouds there. So now I'll copy and paste and put another crystal, another light source, maybe just right here in the center right there. But this time I'll change the hue and maybe give it a different color, like some orange color, just to give it some different color. So copy, paste, put another one down right there. I think that looks good. Yeah, that looks good. And then you know what? Let's go ahead and use this light source right here. I'm going to place it on top. And what I'll do is have to push this down a layer. And I'll push this down a layer. There we go. And then we kind of have this light kind of coming out of it, kind of protruding out. And so you now have this nice kind of cloud citadel tower there. But I think that looks rather good. Now, one thing you can also do is paint some shadows underneath of it. So just take that dark ocean color, set to BG, and then bring the opacity down, because you don't want it to be this pure dark blue. And so just right underneath the clouds to show height, I'll just paint a little bit of dark blue underneath. And then what that will do is it will create this illusion that there's shadows underneath of it. And then that way it'll look like it's floating. So you see already that there is some shadows underneath it. It already gives it this feeling of contrast, right? Contrast is the trick to depth. Dark blue against those lighter cloud colors really makes those clouds pop. And so other things that we can do to make sure that we're really showing that it's underneath. We can even put a little boat or a ship underneath all of it if you want to. So what we can do is we can take a ship, put it on layer 5 here, layer -4. I'm going to bring the brightness down, so because it's in the shadows. And then I'll place another one outside of the shadow like this and bring that brightness up. And then you're really going to show that there is some depth there. That's a little trick. Those are a little big, but remember the representations will bring the ships down. So now you can really kind of see the difference. All right, there you go. So cloud, not too difficult. We're only 33 minutes in. We've already done so much. We can add in some more biomes. Let's go ahead and create the cloud variation without these clouds. Just use a different one. So we'll go ahead and use the more softer ones. So these ones will work fine. I want to build them in a way that's going to create a bridge. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go to placement. So if I scroll down in the stamp tool, when I have this stamp selected, you'll see something called placement. I'm going to turn off for auto select, and I'm going to be able to place multiple at a time. So now I can place multiple instead of one. I'm also going to turn off the shadow because I don't like the shadows. There we go. Now I'm going to create an arch that kind of goes across here with these shadows. I'll do some single clicks to kind of fill it out, right? There we go. We'll make sure we get that arch shape. Yeah, I really like those details too, Jonathan. I think that really, those light sources, whew, they really, really help, don't they? Oopsie, I just realized all these clouds are in layer -4. Not paying attention. Let's bump these up to, let's go layer, I don't want it to be too high up. Let's go layer 2 for now. And you can see the clouds here. I've kind of put that together. I'm also going to create some freeform clouds that are kind of separate from it, and then we'll put some structures on those as well. I think that might be a cool idea. So we'll put one, let's say, let's see if I can get the balance right. Maybe put it right there. No, I don't like it there, actually. Changed my mind. It doesn't look good. Let's just put it down here. Like this. There we go. Okay, so now all those clouds are put down. Now we can go ahead and put down our stuff. And this time I will desaturate things a little bit. So, you know what? Let's use the flat face so that you can kind of see the difference between using the flat and the isometric. So I do kind of like this color scheme right here. I think this kind of goes well with the kind of cloud. So what I'll do is I'll place it on top. And this can be like kind of like a sky palace. And there are some other stamps that are kind of matched to it, like these towers right here. And I'll put one each at the bottom, right at the base. And then I can take those clouds, just like I did before, and place them up a layer, because you see how weird that flat face is and how it kind of transitions. It doesn't look very good, right? And so what I do is I like to hide that line work by just putting some clouds underneath of it. And now it kind of seamlessly kind of goes in a little bit better, right? When before, it was really weird seeing that strange line work kind of getting covered. And then what I'll also do is place some behind it as well. So I'll take some smaller ones and place it behind, just to kind of give it a little bit more depth and dimension to it. There we go. And I think I'll bring the opacity down. So because we're not, what I do is I'll show you a way to use kind of varying levels of clouds by changing the opacity a little bit. So I'll bring the opacity down and I can add a little bit more. Because clouds aren't always the same density, right? They seem to be vaporous, so they can kind of change. So kind of putting in different clouds with a different opacity can kind of change it up, giving it a more realistic feel to it, right? Only the bridge itself is more fully formed clouds, while the other ones kind of around it are kind of more, not quite as substantial. So now that I've kind of added that stuff on there, then I can kind of go in and add in some more stuff. Like what might be cool is to add in some kind of like crystals. I think I already have like this yellowish kind of color here. So if I kind of take these kind of crystals right here, I'm going to kind of place them all about, and then I'll change. What I'll do is I'll end up putting some clouds around them. And these crystals are going to be like an energy source that is kind of power this dome right here. And we'll put some light sources and details there. So with the crystals, we're going to do variations. So I'll have some big ones, some tiny ones. And it's always good to cluster like 2s or 3s. I always call this my little rule of 3, where I'll usually have a cluster of a bunch. And then I can go in now and then bring the cloud up and then just kind of place the clouds on top again. Oopsie, that's a little too much right there. Just right underneath where the line work kind of converges. There you go. And then you really get kind of that more kind of a crystal kind of feel to it. And then we're going to add some light sources to it as well. Yes, it's very different. The rule of 3 is very different from the rule of 2. Just going to say. All right, so now that we've done that part, let's go ahead and add in a light source. And I'm going to use the regular kind of non-orange light source from the Fantasy Battle Map style. So this right here. And what I want to do is I want to put focus on that dome. So I'm going to put a light source just smack dab right on that dome. Let's bring it up. Let's put another one on there to really give it that nice shiny glow to it. And then we'll put some right on top of the roof of this one as well. And then I'm going to place some right on top of the crystals. But what I might do is change the opacity a little bit. So right where the crystals are, I'll place some light sources. There we go. And now you kind of have some light with the crystals on that bridge. And so now you have 2 different types of cloud bridges here. You've got the more natural looking clouds with the front facing POIs, but we just use the clouds to kind of hide the line work, which you'll end up doing a lot, really. Sometimes I don't really care much for the line work at the bottom, and so I'll hide them with a clipping mask or hide them with trees or bushes or a cliff or whatever it might be. Okay, so now we have those 2 done. I'm telling you, the light sources, they really cause it to pop, don't they? I really like those. Let's go ahead and save it for now. And then we still have some time left. It's only 40 after, so we still have like 20 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and add in a couple more stuff, which I'm excited about here. Let this save. Thanks for waiting, everybody. Yeah. There is one other, I think most of the biomes are done. There is one other kind of biome that I wanted to create, and that was, I'm going to remove this creature. I'm going to put the monsters over here. I'm going to create like a giant swirl, I think, inside of here, because I want this water right here to be something magical, and I hadn't fully figured out how to make it magical, and I think I might have an idea that might work. So I think what I should do also is create the shadow underneath this bridge right here. I kind of forgot to do that. There we go. Now it really gives it that sense of depth. Yeah, I generally make saves about every 100 changes or so, but sometimes when you're texturing, that can go out of wonk. So I never kind of go fully with always this amount of changes, because you can, I'm telling you, there's so many changes that you can do with texturing. You know, I'm going to do a couple more details actually with this, because I am liking this a little bit. I think what I will do is I'm going to use a spell. And there's these nice like little spell explosions. And I think that would kind of add a little more to this. Just a little bit. Let's change it to maybe, I don't know, lighten. We'll go through the different blend modes and see which one kind of looks the best. You know, I kind of like the color dodge. I think that looks kind of good. And then I think I want to have it just like right on the dome, or just right close to the dome. Let's see here. I think just a little bit smaller. Yeah, I think that helps. Okay, that looks good. And then, you know what? There is one other thing that I want to do. Check this out. Under battle maps, there's a Fey Light. So let's see, where is that? Right here. It's called Fey Lights. This is great. You can take this right here and just place it right. Let's see which one works best. I think this one looks the best. Let's just place that right on top like this. There we go. I just wanted to add a little bit more detail. I kind of felt like just adding a little bit more detail would have been nice. And then I want to add a little bit more right on these little towers. I can't help it. I just love to add little details. There we go. Okay, and then, you know, there is one more thing that I want to do. I wanted those crystals to have like electricity kind of going towards the dome. I did mention that they're powering it. So if I type in electricity, or just, oh, there should be these electricity bolts right here. But we want to change the color because it's this purple color, bluish color. So I can go in and kind of find that yellowish kind of color. I think that is a green. Whew. Let's bump the saturation up, and this will help me kind of bring out that yellowish color. Let's see here. There it is, right there. Perfect. There we go. And now I can kind of create these lightning pieces that kind of connect to that. So let's go place those there. Let's add one there. Let's kind of add one coming from right here to here. Let's put another one going like right here to there, to there, to there. And then let's have some electricity coming out off of the dome as well. Kind of like that. So, and I will bring the opacity down just a little bit on that one. There we go. Oh yeah, this is a color dodge blend mode. The opacity doesn't work so well on this one, so I would just change it to like lighten instead, and now you can have a little bit more effect, and it gives it a little bit more red to it, which I think kind of gives it a little bit more character, so that's kind of nice. Right there. Okay. Let's change it to lighten. There we go. Yeah, I like that. A little bit better. There we go. Let's bring the opacity down. There we go. So you got some electricity coming out of that. There we go. Nice. So now you have a little bit more effects there. So yeah, always a cool trick to add a little bit of lighting to your map, and that really makes it pop. Let's go ahead and add in, I'm going to do this last part, which is I'm going to place a kind of a swirl effect in this water, because what's really important is that this water is magical. It comes from this Fey biome that I made right here, and so I really want to show that these waters are magical. There's a couple ways that I can do it. I can color it. I can add some kind of effects inside of it. What I think I will do is use the swirl that exists within Fantasy World. I really just love these stamps. This is just so nice. And I'm going to scale it up as big as I can get it. And then I'm going to follow that isometric rule that I taught you with the hotbars. And I'm going to scale it up to be just even bigger. Nice and big, nice and big. There we go. I'm going to kind of... Let's see if I can flip it. I'm wondering if it looks better this way. I don't know. Let's try it that way. Kind of hard to decide which one looks best. I think I kind of like it this way originally. I think that looks best. Here we go. Put it right in here. And I kind of want the swirl to be centered. So right about there looks good. I'm going to change the blend mode to luminosity. So it's going to pick up whatever color is beneath it. I'm going to change some settings here. Let's change the blend mode a little bit here. Let's try overlay. We'll try bringing the brightness up and bringing the opacity down. There we go. I think that looks about good. I just want to make sure that I get that swirl part kind of central. So I might have to rotate it a couple times to kind of get the swirl part right where I want it. I think right about there looks good. And then I can go into the hamburger menu. I'm going to go to flatten, flatten to BG. And then you're going to see that that swirl part is just only in the water now. It's not on the FG. Now, it looks a little weird with that kind of thick line work there. So I have to add a little bit more to give it that kind of more of a magical feel to it. So a couple things I can do is I can use a light source to do a lot of that work for me. So I can take that big light source that I just put down. Oops, I'm kind of getting laggy a little bit here. Let's delete that light source. Oh, yeah, I'm getting super laggy. Okay, let's scale that light source. Let's go opacity all the way up. Just going to place it right on top. Let's go up to the highest layer. We're going to change the hue. Find that color that we're looking for. There we go. I kind of like that color. I'm going to change through the blend modes to kind of find the best blend mode. It's really going to work well. Oh, no, I don't think that's going to work. Oh, wait. Ooh, I do like that. That was kind of interesting. This kind of... Ooh, that's kind of creepy cool. I like that. I think I'll bring the opacity down a little bit on it, and then I can take it and then I can flatten it to the BG layer again, and then it will only be in the water there. So now I kind of have this nice, very clearly magical like water. And then what I will do is I do want to create a series of like fog that's kind of around the bank of it. So I'm thinking because I'm using this kind of greenish light color, I can kind of use that kind of green color. So let's go with fog. Let's go with just opening up Inkarnate. And I think I can find some of this bluish kind of greenish fog-like color. Because what I don't like is the transition between the water and the ground. So there's this nice fog from Fantasy Battle Maps. I think I'll just use this. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of place it all along the ledge here. And what this will do is create a nice transition between my land and that crazy water, right? So we'll add some blue there. Let's add some blue along here, along here. It's really going to help to kind of create that transition that I want. There we go. Add there. There should be some all along here and here and here. There we go. And so now you have this nice kind of blue kind of mist. And what we want is we can also make it real big. And then we can also change the blend mode. And then we can kind of see what kind of effects that kind of gives us. What's really cool is just to play with stuff. So I'll go with that light and blend mode. Oh, I kind of like that color burn. That's kind of a cool effect. I kind of like that. Let's scale that up a little bit. And then let's go ahead and use this color burn part and kind of place it in a specific part of it. So I can kind of place it over here or along this ledge right here. It's up to you. Bring the opacity up. Let me see just what it looks like without it. Yeah, I kind of like it with it. So I'm going to copy and paste. Let's just put it right there. Let's put another one. Let's change the blend mode to, let's go with hard light. So I got that hard light. And I'm going to place it just right along this ledge right here. Copy, paste. Let's put another one down right over here. There we go. So now you kind of have that mystical kind of water. The other thing that I want to do is I want to have maybe some light coming out of the water. So really cool trick is that you can actually use light from the sci-fi battle map style. There is a stamp called light. right here. It's called a lens flare, and this is great stuff. You can kind of use these, and what I can do is I can kind of place them along where the water meets, and I can kind of create these kind of, whenever the water meets the land, there's this kind of interesting transition. So I'm just going to add these all along the coastal. I'm going to do this one size, and then I'll add some other ones on there. So add a couple there, add a couple here, here, and then I'll bring the scale down, make them a little bit smaller. Oh, those are a little too small. There we go. And kind of place these smaller ones. There you go. It looks good. And then maybe I'll place some larger ones coming out of the larger part of the swirl, and then some upper ones next to it. There you go. Okay. So pretty easy stuff, kind of putting that together. Now you have this very clearly magical-like area here. So, and you could probably make some more changes to it, but I think you get the general idea that this is meant to be magical. You could use those fey lights as well, like we had here. Just change that hue to be that more bluish color, and then you can kind of place those down. I think right now under color dodge, blue might not work as well, so might go with lighten or screen. Let's take a look which one is the best one. Let's go up a layer. Yeah, I think about there looks good. Let's go ahead and place that down, and I think that will add the last kind of effect. I think kind of giving it that final piece to it that looks really nice. There you go. So now we have this magical sea, which I think looks really good, and I'll go ahead and make my saves. So pretty easy to put together, not complex. So the polar regions, the more realistic biomes, super easy. It's just about knowing those 3 types of biomes that are really helpful. That tundra, just remember permafrost, and therefore less trees, or no trees at all really, because of that permafrost. And then your polar barren, which is mostly going to be cracked ice, snow, but there is going to be just a little bit of vegetation here and there. Do remember to add just a little bit of vegetation here and there to give that contrast. Remember we did fjords, where I added some ice stuff, which I noticed I didn't put some in here, and I should. So I'll do that real quick while we're over here. Let's put some here, and that way it kind of connects these together. And then we'll use that cracked ice texture if I can find it. I think it's all snow. That's it right there, I think. Okay. Put it in the BG and then kind of put it on top here. Got that cracked ice. Oops. Bring the opacity up. There we go. Got that cracked ice for that polar region. And then we ended up doing the clouds. I don't know which one honestly looks better, this one or this one. I kind of like this one because I just really love those purplish, pinkish colors. I think those look really nice, but I don't think that they contrast too much with each other. Like, I know that these clouds are like 2 different kind of competing art styles, but they kind of work here. I'm not even sure I will change it. I think it looks kind of cool. So I'll probably end up keeping that. In the next stream, we actually are going to be doing a lot more lore. Because the way that I do lore is that I prefer the land to do much of the lore for me. It's really hard when you have a blank canvas or a blank page and you're trying to figure out all the different lore for all the different locations and everything that's going on. And so that can be kind of intimidating. But when you already have a page filled with stuff, then you can kind of look at the landscape and say, oh, hey, there was an epic event that took place here, or there was a battle that took place here, or there was an epic catastrophe that took place, or a magical scar, or I can go with the lore about the people that live in this Fey region, because I can look at the land and say, oh, it's a harsh environment, and so they're a strong and sturdy people because they have to survive in a harsh environment, right? So it's like really, for me, what creates lore is having the land they're already there. If you dive in with the lore first, I find that that's like a kind of a writer's job, and that's really, really hard just to dive in right away without having any material to kind of work with. So it's always super, super hard to kind of put that together. Do I use the pin system? No, I actually have my own way of doing points of interest, and I don't know a lot about the pin system, so I'll have to look that up and check it out. That sounds interesting. So I think this is the last stream of the month, and then it'll be next month. And I think the first stream, I can't remember on the stream calendar what's coming up, but we've got a bunch of cool stuff coming up, a bunch of cool master classes where we're going to be covering, like, we're going to do a double feature of roof and staircases. I know a lot of people struggle with like kind of these advanced roof structures. And so I'm kind of taking the time to kind of figure out how to put those advanced kind of roof structures together so that you can kind of create all these cool looking roof structures. And then staircases, which, I mean, I think some people kind of struggle with knowing which part goes up and down and how to make a spiral staircase. All of those things are the way that I don't really use the note tool here. And honestly, I would love to see Inkarnate. Kind of make the note system a little bit more robust. And I think that's probably on the future to-do list, but it's just not being done right now. But it's definitely something the team has considered, and I am super excited about that because I would love to have a really, really robust note system where you can like click a location and it will give you all the text and you can edit it and change it. I think that makes more sense than putting little pins because you have to switch between clicking a note and then clicking between the other tools. And for me, that's just not intuitive for me. So I honestly just do all my notes somewhere else for now. But I can put my notes into the note system into here if you want to see how is it I put them together and how I would use them. That's no problem with me whatsoever. So, and then I think we're almost done with this. There's only 2 more episodes of this series because we are just, we're at like 80% right now. We have to add in the last little bit of just grass for the plateau flat areas. And then we're going to throw in all of our points of interest. We're going to add in all of our lore. So I'm excited about all of that stuff. So stay tuned for all of that. I think it's going to be next Friday for that one. So stay tuned, okay? Thanks everyone for watching. Please stay safe and healthy. Merry map making, and I will see you all next week. Have a great weekend, okay? Bye, everyone.